Right now, opioid deaths in Georgia are on the way down. We're going to welcome a former White House senior drug policy advisor to go inside those numbers. Also, President Donald Trump says there's a way for him to get a third term as president. We're going to bring in a constitutional expert to see how and if that's possible, and find out how many of us are dipping into our emergency savings and learn what we can do to make sure that critical medical bill or car repair is paid. This is The Take. Let's get it. Hello and welcome to The Take. I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines and look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite experts in to give their take on today's top stories, and we try to have a little bit of fun as well. So let's get to the beginning. This has been a week, if you will, of headlines for the Atlanta-based Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The Department of Health and Human Services is eliminating close to 10,000 jobs. That's roughly a quarter of them at the CDC. We spoke with one now former worker who found out they were being laid off in an early morning email.
I am less afraid for myself. I am single. I do not have a family to support. So many of my coworkers have families who I don't know what they must be thinking right now. One of my coworkers is 7 months pregnant, just got fired.
Other agencies targeted with layoffs Tuesday were the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institutes for Health, and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The layoffs come soon after the CDC shed some new light, that is, on the fight against opioid abuse. The new data shows fatalities tied to the drug dropped in 2023 and continued well through the first half of 2024. The national year-to-year decline in opioid-related deaths was just over 17%. In Georgia, that figure is even more dramatic, a drop in deaths at nearly 25%, with nearly 500 less deaths from opioids in 2024 than the year before. Here now on The Take is Professor Stephen Patrick, the chair of Embry's Department of Health Policy and Management. He's also the former senior policy advisor for the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. Welcome to The Take, Stephen.
Great to be here.
All right. When you hear those numbers from the CDC, what's your take? Do you think we've turned the corner now in the fight against opioids?
I think we've made substantial progress, but it's worth remembering that we're still higher than we were before the pandemic. So we have room to go, but I think we don't want to lose momentum to the progress we've made.
What do you think has been the result of getting those numbers down?
Well, we've certainly seen substantial fewer deaths. I think that's because we've invested in more treatment, access to things like naloxone, which saves people's lives when they're having an overdose.
Why do you think Georgia is sitting a little bit above the national average?
Well, Georgia's done a good job, like other states have, and making sure that people can get access to life-saving medications like naloxone, as well as getting people into treatment. We know that treatment reduces risk of overdose death by about 50%.
All right. Well, Professor Patrick, President Trump's administration has made the link to opioid crisis with the smuggling across the border. And recently, that prompted the Health and Human Services to extend their emergency declaration linked to the crisis to mid-June. And here's part of a statement from Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Although overdose deaths are starting to decline, opioid-related overdoses remain the leading cause of related fatalities. This administration is going to treat this urgent crisis in American health as a national security emergency that it is. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it is a national emergency. We still have tons of deaths, but it's not just about the border. We can't just focus on supply. We have to focus on getting people into treatment. We still have far too many people that die, 2,000 Georgians in the last year. So we still have a lot of way to go, and it's not just about reducing supply at the border.
And what we're hearing is those numbers are going down as far as the related deaths go. Where should our concern turn now when it comes to drugs, or is this just where our focus needs to be?
Well, we're still higher than we were before the pandemic. And one of the things I worry about are all the cuts that we saw yesterday might lead to some backtracking of the progress we've made. Just for example, the Injury Center at CDC was one of the groups that was targeted. We don't know how this will play out, but Georgia alone, Georgia Department of Health gets $4.2 million from the Injury Center to fight overdose. So we don't know exactly where this is heading, but I have a lot of concerns about what happened yesterday.
So with the cuts, you think it get prompted to go back up?
I worry about that. So I think we need to be vigilant. We need to focus on the things that we know that work, access to naloxone, and getting people into treatment.
Are there any other drugs out there that we need to be concerned about?
Sure, we've seen a rise of stimulants, things like methamphetamines and cocaine. That's something we need to be watching. And I think broadly, we just need to be monitoring kind of how we're doing, how we can make sure that we protect Americans from these epidemics that happen every few years.
The reason why I asked that question is, like you were saying, if we focus too much on one, do we let the others go? You find that maybe being the case as well?
Well, one of the other things, again, not to talk about, yesterday we saw a lot of things. The other thing that we saw was the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which is the gold standard to know how substance use is happening across the U.S. That entire team was fired yesterday. So I worry about our ability to monitor emerging threats too. So you're right, we have to be broad in the way that we focus. We have to be thinking about more than one substance, but all of this breaks down into public health approaches that we know that work against all substance use crises.
Last question for you. How does Georgia rank when it comes to not only opioids, but all these other drugs as well? How does Georgia rank? Do you know that?
Well, Georgia's on par, right? Okay. So we know that Georgia hasn't been as hit as some other states like West Virginia and parts of the Northeast, and they have done better in terms of overdose deaths compared to other states.
All right, Professor Patrick, really appreciate you joining us this morning and giving us your insight. Really appreciate that.
Great to be here.
All right, have a great day. All right, the woman charged with making a fake 911 call before the events that led to the death of rapper Young Scooter will go before a judge. 31-year-old Demetra Spence is in a Fulton County jail. She is charged with transmitting false public alarm. She'll appear before a judge around noontime today. A teen is recovering after being shot in Conyers. This led to a SWAT standoff last night. The scene was along Centennial Olympic Parkway. A SWAT team responded to an apartment where they thought the suspect was hiding out, but the suspect was not located inside that apartment. Investigators believe the suspect may also be a juvenile. Let's take a look at our forecast for today, and the only difference today would be the cloud cover. We're not going to have that sunshine like we had yesterday. Mostly cloudy skies will be the call. We will get some breaks in the clouds and get some sunshine in. That's going to help to boost that temperature up to about 84 degrees for this afternoon. 20% chance for an isolated shower or two. For the most part, we will remain dry. Mix of sun and clouds for the next couple of days. In fact, you see that temperature for the next couple of days going up. 87 degrees for the high on Thursday. Friday, we're looking at 89, 88 by Saturday. Those 3 days we could tie or break some records. Pay close attention. We'll keep you updated on that. Low threats for rain, even though you're going to hear about severe weather off to the Midwest. It's not going to make it down toward us. It won't be until Sunday that a front will move close enough to the area that will spread us some rain and give us a few scattered thunderstorms, some of which could be on the strong side. We'll watch and monitor that for you. That front will also cool us down for next week. We'll see those temperatures dipping down into the 60s by the time we begin next week. Don't go anywhere, folks. We're back right after this.
From all Americans, this is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor.
That was New Jersey Senator Cory Booker ending his marathon floor speech protesting the Trump administration after he spoke for 25 hours and 5 minutes. Wow. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr, who's been covering politics for years now. And Alice, 25 hours on the Senate floor. Take us through this record-breaking speech that he made and what he's calling a national crisis posed by the president.
Hi there. Yeah, Cory Booker, the senator, Democratic senator from New Jersey, when he stood up, he said he wanted to draw attention to what he sees as a national crisis caused by President Trump's policies. And much of his speech was spent going through each of those issues that he has and then reading off letters from his constituents talking about the way that the Trump administration's policies that have been rolled out are affecting them in real ways in terms of their health care, in terms of the economy, losing jobs. all the things that they're concerned about. That was a lot of what he talked about. And, this was a serious feat, 25 plus hours. We heard from Senator Booker afterwards speaking to NBC News, and he said that, this was something that was very important to him for a number of reasons, one of them being that he did not like that the previous record for the longest continuous speech on the Senate floor was held by Strom Thurmond, who at that time, many years ago, was speaking against the civil rights movement, and that he had always felt that that was something that hung over the Senate to have that record stand. So he made a concerted effort to make it not just to the 24 hours and I believe 19-minute mark, but to make it a good deal beyond that, just over 25 hours. 24 hours and 19 was the Thurmond record, and 25 hours plus now the Cory Booker record.
Wow, maybe that'll stand for a little while. That's a long time to speak. You've been covering severe weather.
Yes.
I'm gonna do that. All right, Alice. After a month of speculation, President Trump will unveil his much-anticipated tariff plan today. What do we know? Do we know any specifics in the plan today?
We don't. That's the interesting part. This is something that he's been teasing for quite a long time. He calls it Liberation Day. He said that these are going to be tariffs against all foreign trading partners, adversaries, allies alike. And, he believes that there are widespread trade imbalances between the U.S. and other countries that he wants to now see reversed. He has not yet said which countries are going to be affected, to what degree, and on what products. And of course, this fits into really a matrix already of tariffs that have already been imposed on a sweeping number of products from a sweeping number of countries. And most notably, going into effect today to actually start being collected tomorrow is these 25% tariffs on foreign-made auto cars, the same for foreign auto parts set to follow. And we're seeing a lot of concerns about how that's going to force prices up for both foreign-made cars and domestically assembled vehicles that use foreign auto parts. Difficult to say this is a foreign car, this is a domestic made in the USA car, because there's so much intermingling now.
Gotcha. This comes a day after voters went to the polls in 2 key states to give their early indication of how they feel about the second Trump administration so far. Walk us through the results from Wisconsin and Florida.
Yeah, these were closely watched elections. In Wisconsin, the Liberal candidate Susan Crawford defeated the conservative Brad Schimmel, despite the fact that there were millions of dollars poured into this race by Trump advisor Elon Musk. The results maintain a Liberal majority on the battleground state's high court, something that Musk had really argued against. And this fuels Democrats' views of Musk as a potential political weakness. We've heard that a lot. Well, in Florida, 2 Republicans won special elections for congressional seats left vacant by Trump appointees, shoring up the razor-thin House GOP majority. So victories for both sides in these results, as everyone's looking for ideas about how the electorate is feeling about the Trump administration.
Gotcha, Alice. Thanks so much for joining us. We see you again tomorrow.
Thanks.
All right, this week, President Trump opened up a potential constitutional dilemma, if you will. Right now, he's in his first few months of his second 4-year term as the nation's commander-in-chief. However, he's now making mention of at least thoughts of serving another term in the White House after his current one expires in January 20th of 2029.
People are asking me to run, and there's a whole story about running for a third term. I don't know. I never looked into it. They do say there's a way you can do it, but I don't know about that, but I have not looked into it. I want to do a fantastic job. We have 4 years, just about, almost close to 4 years.
All right, we brought in our expert this morning, Andrew Gillespie, associate professor in the Department of Political Science at Emory University. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, President Trump says there's a way he can do it. Do you think there's a way he can do it? Is it true?
No, I don't think there's a legal way that he can do it. When the United States ratified the 22nd Amendment, they were doing so actually in response to the norm violation that President Franklin Roosevelt did when he ran for 4 consecutive terms. And this was an opportunity for President Roosevelt to expand the powers of the presidency. So he took advantage of the crises of the Depression and of World War II to make the case that America needed continuity in leadership. The issue is that there had been a longstanding norm created by George Washington that presidents served only 2 terms in power. And founding fathers like President Washington and President Thomas Jefferson had all made the comment that, when you serve more than 2 terms, you're now starting to slip into monarchy. And so there have always been concerns about the United States being distinct from Great Britain, and actually also sort of highlighting democracy and trying to eschew autocracy. And so when Congress is debating the 22nd Amendment and the first step of that ratification process, people were very clear that they were doing this because they were worried about a potential slide to autocracy. And they're also very clear that presidents can only get elected twice. So it's possible to serve more than 8 years in office, say, if you succeed a president, let's say a president dies in office and then the vice president is elevated, that president can then serve 2 terms in their own right. But there really isn't a way to get around it. I know that President Trump's legal team is looking at other ways of getting around it, potentially running as J.D. Vance's vice president and having Vance kind of resign and elevating Trump to the presidency. But the 12th Amendment precludes anybody who is ineligible to be president from running for president again. So I think the only real way to be able to do it is to amend the Constitution, and that's going to be a really tall order. You can't get 2/3 of the House and Senate to agree to this, I believe. And even if you could, I'm not sure that you could get 3/4 of the states to then ratify this.
Jeez. So you sound like it's lock solid that he would not be able to do it. And you mentioned a couple of ways that he could get around it. I was going to ask you about him becoming vice president and then, going that way. But you're saying in the Constitution it says that you're prohibited from doing that as serving president already, right?
Yeah, so I mean, he can try to make the case that he should that the Constitution should be amended. That's actually probably the most legal way to do it. I think it would be a question of actually being able to get the type of national consensus that he would need in order to be able to make this happen legally. So, President Trump is known for throwing ideas out there. If people don't like this idea, they should, express it to their members of Congress. They should express it in public opinion polls. There have been times when President Trump has been persuaded because people have kind of reacted negatively to an idea. But I don't see, and I do qualify that I'm not a lawyer, I do not see a legal way to make this happen short of amending the Constitution to change the 22nd Amendment.
Andrew, why do you think he's talking about this now? Why do you think he's bringing this up? Do you know?
Well, I mean, there are lots of different reasons why people could say this. Look, there's some people who look at President Trump as a norms violator, and there's certainly lots of aspects of his both his first and his second terms that suggest that he wants to shatter norms. There are people who are concerned that with his election in 2024, that America is sliding to autocracy and that he's challenging democratic norms in a way that could be destabilizing and weakening of our American institutions. And then there are people who look at his personality, right? He likes to kind of stir things up. There are other people who might make arguments that the idea of trying to be a third-term president is a way that he would try to be distinctive from other presidents, barring Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that, this, might be, in their interpretation, just, another piece of evidence for his narcissism. But, they're really sort of like this would not necessarily be the greatest thing for democracy. Mm-hmm. And, if it happened via a constitutional amendment, that would be fair and square. But for it to happen in another way would be, I think, yet another sign that American democracy isn't what it used to be.
All right. Professor Gillespie, great insight. Thank you for breaking that all down for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Plenty more stories for you on the take. You're watching 11Alive Plus. We're back right after this. Well, it's smart to have some emergency savings set aside, of course, to cover medical expenses or a car repair, right? But you shouldn't have to use it for everyday expenses. However, new bank rate data showing us that 1/3 of Americans had to tap their emergency savings in the past, while half of those folks did it to cover major emergencies. Roughly 4 in 10 did it to pay off monthly bills such as rent and utilities, and another third used it for everyday expenses like gas and groceries. Here now is friend of the show, financial expert Andrew Poulos. Welcome back to the show, my friend, well-dressed friend.
Good morning, Chesley. How are you today?
Doing pretty good. Andrew, when you hear these statistics, right, isn't it scary? I mean, don't you think it's scary that people would have to tap their emergency savings to pay for groceries?
Yeah, that is concerning, alarming to say the least, right? It's one thing if you're tapping your emergency savings for a true emergency, something completely unforeseen, unpredictable, so to speak. But when you're tapping in for just regular, everyday, expenses for food, groceries, utilities, gas, that becomes problematic.
Does this speak to the nation's economy right now?
Look, I think we're experiencing some challenging times, right? It's the last 5 years have been challenging for many folks. A lot of people are still feeling the trickle effects from inflation. Some just have never really bounced back. We've got folks who have lost their jobs. Some people are working 2 jobs, right? Part-time work also to try to make ends meet. So you just got a variety of situations out there. But yeah, there's people struggling.
You probably wouldn't say there's a magic number, but what is that number that we should have in our emergency savings? How much should we have there?
Look, I always say I'd like to have 6 months, right? 6 months to cover full expenses, not 6 months of groceries or 6 months of utilities or 6 months of rent. I'd like to have 6 months of just complete. So if your living expenses, household expenses, for example, are $3,000 a month, it would be ideal to get 6 months. Now, is that something that can be achieved overnight if you've never saved before? No. The first step would be to get going, putting pen and paper together, trying to figure out where you can cut on your expenses. Maybe you're overspending, maybe you're just not really watching, right? So if you do a deep dive of your financial expenses and start figuring out where you can cut costs and start putting that money into savings, that's your first step.
I was going to ask you to have somebody sitting there right now saying, man, I haven't a dime to save. I have to spend it all on this, that, and the third. You're saying you really need to be examining what you're doing and how you're spending to get to that point.
Yeah, you do. All of us do, right? I mean, I can guarantee you that if we all sit down and look at our bank statements and our credit card statements, we're all going to find something that we're paying for that we may not even be using. Go through and do a deep dive and see what are you spending each month, maybe that you just don't really need. Is it the gym membership that you got as a New Year's resolution where you really are not going anymore? You don't have time? Is it apps that you're paying for on your iPhone that you're not really using, right? I mean, if you go through, you're going to find something, whether it's $20 here and $50 here, it all starts adding up, and that money could be going to savings. The other thing that is very powerful is if you're working at your job and you have direct deposit and you're being paid by direct deposit, a lot of employers will allow you to be able to provide 2 bank accounts. So you have your primary checking account where your money's going into. Maybe you figure out how much you can afford to put into a savings account and have that money automatically each pay period go into that savings account where you really never see it. It's out of sight, out of mind, but it lets you start building up a savings. Okay,
Andrew, I give up. I give up. You're right. I'm going to stop putting that money toward those ties and pocket squares trying to keep up with you. You're making me broke. I'm going to stop doing it.
We're going to go shopping together one day, but we've got to build up the budget for that first.
That's absolutely right. My friend, Andrew, really appreciate you being on the show today, and thanks for your insight.
Absolutely.
All right. Don't go anywhere, folks. I'm back with my final take right after this. All right, take a look, folks. Temperatures will be heating up over the next couple of days, well above our average for this time of year. Keep in mind, we should be around 70. Today, 84, despite the fact that we'll have mostly cloudy skies out there. There will be some breaks in those clouds and a 20% chance for an isolated shower. Very hot the next couple of days. 87 on Thursday, Friday 89, 88 on Saturday. Looking at 81 by Sunday. That's when a front will come through and bring a better chance for some rain. Right now, 60% chance. There could be some strong to severe thunderstorms around as well. Timing right now for that looks to be late afternoon on Sunday going into Sunday evening. And then we cool down back to the 60s, in fact, low 60s as we head into next week. All right, before we go, my final take. Hey, don't look now. Your Atlanta Braves are at 0-6. That's right. 0 wins, 6 losses. They currently sit at the bottom of the National League East division with the Phillies on top at 3-1. That's only 4 games behind. Stop the panic, okay? Don't come to me talking about it's over. The season is over. Do you recall the Braves won it all back in 2021 when they started off the season 0-5? They haven't even played a home game yet. There's 162 games in a season. Plenty of baseball to be played. Yeah. Okay, come to me when they lose 15 or 20 in a row. All right, then you can start to panic. You know I'm a Phillies fan, so you're just trying to hype me up, get me all excited early so you can break me down by midseason. I understand. I know what you're doing. Braves will be fine, folks. They'll be fine. In fact, the first home game is this Friday. This coming weekend, they play the Marlins. Go ahead and enjoy it, folks. All right, do something great today. Encourage someone. We'll see you again tomorrow.